Welcome to the Miller Report, Real Clear Journalism. I'm Maggie Miller. Today we're discussing Ana Kasparian's latest investigation into the struggles facing California. California once stood as a crown jewel of American business, but today companies are fleeing the Golden State, citing high costs, tough regulations, and rising risks. Let's take Bed Bath & Beyond, for example. Once centered in California before it claimed bankruptcy, now it's going about opening 300 new stores nationwide. Not a single one will be in the state. Executives call the state overregulated, expensive, and simply too risky. But not the only businesses taking operations elsewhere. So is Tesla, Charles Schwab, and even Chevron. Smaller businesses are also struggling, shutting their doors because they're dealing with rising crime, steep taxes, and one of the nation's highest minimum wages. In some cases, the employees actually end up getting less hours as a result that the businesses cannot afford the wages that are required. California now has the nation's highest unemployment rate. That's up 45% since 2022. More than 10% of Californians are unemployed or underemployed. In the first 3 months of 2025, the state lost nearly 55,000 private sector jobs. Yes, some of those losses are outside of California's control due to tariffs or artificial intelligence, but it's still a major issue. Making matters worse, California's unemployment insurance fund is deep in the red. It hasn't updated its taxable wage base since 1983, and now owes Washington more than $22 billion. That's the largest debt of its kind in the nation. Experts warn the system is headed for a $2 billion annual deficit through 2030 unless lawmakers raise payroll taxes, cut benefits, or both. With more companies leaving and costs rising, some wonder if the California dream is just slipping further out of reach. I'm joined now by the lead investigator on this story, Ana Kasparian. Ana, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Maggie.
So obviously you do focus in on California and the woes, and maybe hopefully one day we'll be talking about some great stuff that's coming to the state. But let's talk a little bit about this doom loop that California is finding themselves in.
Well, there's something really fascinating happening, and I'm not quite sure how California's political leaders are going to get us out of it. But currently, we have an issue with rising unemployment. Historically speaking, California tends to have a higher unemployment rate compared to the national rate. And to be sure, that is the case right now. We're at about 5% unemployment, but that's just the official number as reported through our labor department, and they consider anyone who works a single hour per week as someone who is employed. So when you look at a different metric that's known as U6, and that includes individuals who are both unemployed, underemployed, meaning they're working part-time, but they really need full-time work. They're not making enough money with the part-time work to make ends meet. And in addition to that, a group that has essentially just kind of given up on looking for work at all. When you include all of those people, the unemployment rate in California is actually up to 10%. So that is a terrible place to be when at the same time, simultaneously, our unemployment insurance fund, which people tap into when they're unemployed, when they've been fired, and they need, just something in the meantime, but as they're looking for work to make ends meet, that is in a significant amount of debt at this point, over $20 billion in debt. And when you have rising unemployment, that means less revenue, less resources go to the unemployment insurance program. And it's happening again at a time when the state is just really struggling with employment, with the labor market. And then you look at what's happening nationally, that's only compounding a problem. California was not in a good position to withstand what we're experiencing, economically on a national level.
So talk to me a little bit about that unemployment insurance. Like who's going to be facing the repercussions of it being in such disrepair? Is it the business? Is it the employee? Is it just the state just falling further and further into debt? What is it?
Well, the debt that is owed by California is debt owed to the federal government specifically. So just to kind of back up a little bit and give you the context so people understand why or how this debt works exactly. During the COVID pandemic, obviously, because of forced shutdowns, many people lost their jobs. Many people were laid off. They had no source of income. At that time, and this was during the Trump administration, I actually agreed with this policy. I thought that it was the right thing to do. The federal government, with the help of Congress, of course, legislatively, had essentially secured additional federal unemployment funds to help bolster statewide unemployment programs at a time when many people lost their jobs through no fault of their own. Now, the problem is California took a ton of money, and there were two problems. They essentially did not do a good job in, if you don't need to use the money, don't take that federal money and use it for other things. But California lawmakers did. And that actually really worked to our detriment. It should have just been kept on the side because obviously you're going to have to pay that money back to the federal government. California didn't do that. On top of that, there was $55 billion in fraud in our unemployment insurance program. And they're trying to recoup some of the money, but they're nowhere close to recouping it. And at this point, we still owe $20 billion, over $20 billion to the federal government as a result of that unemployment insurance program. Now, on top of that, we have been late. California has been late in paying the balance back to the federal government. And when that happens, well, obviously we get penalized and the interest builds up. So the cost of servicing that debt as California taxpayers, business taxpayers, and I'll get to that in a moment, becomes more expensive. And so we're just in a very dire situation right now as the state of California, because you have to pay that money back to the federal government. And since we were late, and since there is a mandate to pay that money back by a certain time, every business that operates in the state of California now has to pay an additional payroll tax fee that will help to pay back the money that is owed to the federal government. And if the full balance isn't paid by a certain time, that fee increases in cost. And essentially, it is a fee that you pay per employee in your company. And what this is leading to is more businesses deciding, maybe we stop operating our headquarters in California, maybe we move out of state. So that is accelerating the problem of unemployment, which is a disaster, for our unemployment insurance program, which is underfunded and is currently in the very debt that the federal government is penalizing, the state for.
And is California continuing to borrow more, or is it kind of staying stagnant at, we owe the federal government this much, we can't ask for more?
I have to look into that. I don't want to say yes or no, because there could be some instances, for instance, with the natural disasters that have happened. I know that FEMA did step in and help California. I don't know if there's a possibility that there was some money borrowed. I know for a fact that, in Los Angeles City, when the ICE raids were happening, there were mass protests, there was some rioting. And so that really did drive up the police budget, because we have also underfunded historically the LAPD. We have a severe shortage of sworn officers, another story that I published for RCI. And that shortage has led to an increase in overtime pay for the remaining sworn officers. So in order to pay for LAPD, I think there was a loan made to the city of Los Angeles, which is also a pretty disastrous situation. But let me just say, there's been a lot of mismanagement. There's no reason why $55 billion in unemployment funds should have gone to people in other countries in some cases. There was just really no oversight. So I think really the heart of the problem, what really served as the catalyst of this crisis that California is in, is the fact that our leaders didn't engage in the proper oversight to ensure that $55 billion in unemployment funds weren't spent on people committing fraud or individuals who were getting more benefits than they were entitled to.
Sorry, I just caught that. What do you mean by people in other countries?
There have been some stories about individuals who have been able to essentially pose as Californians who have lost their jobs. And as a result of the lack of oversight, even though they were foreigners, they used VPNs and things like that. They still qualified for the funds, or there were also cases of identity theft, which is also a difficult situation for the state. I understand that, but there needs to be better oversight of the funds, and there needs to be a verification and vetting process to make sure the money is actually going to the people who need it.
Is this a California specific issue, or are other big states across the country also seeing this? Or, obviously, did you focus in on California? You're not sure.
Right. I mean, I'm sure. I'm sure other states were victimized by the same type of fraud. It's just that the numbers really stand out when it comes to California, because $55 billion is not a small amount. And it, again, served as a catalyst for this economic disaster that we're dealing with. There's just this effort to encourage businesses to stay in the state because we are having a problem with a rising unemployment. But if the businesses are increasingly penalized as a result of that unemployment insurance program debt that's owed to the federal government, well, that serves as a disincentive in staying in California. So I guess we're going to wait and see how this is all going to play out, but it is a pretty dire situation.
I mean, yeah, you named some pretty big businesses that are looking elsewhere. And I mean, it's kind of interesting when you think about it. It's like, what do you do when California can't even keep jobs in the sectors that they made big, like film or technology? Like, I mean, you've got the hubs right there in California, and those businesses are looking elsewhere. It seems like it's just like a lose situation for California.
Well, that's a really great point. I would also like to add that there are some things happening. Well, just to talk about what California has, I guess, produced in terms of innovation. Silicon Valley is obviously a huge player in AI, and AI has been very profitable for some, but it has already led to significant job losses, primarily in Silicon Valley. Coders have lost their jobs. And so the very sector where there is innovation in California is actually kind of leading to the downfall of workers in the state and increasing the unemployment rate, not just in California, but also in the nation. So I get into that in the piece as well. But there are also national trends, including Trump's, multi-pronged trade war that he's currently engaging in. Those tariffs have started to really slow down the economy nationally. And so, again, California wasn't in the best spot to withstand what we're dealing with on a national level. But I do want to also look at the bigger picture and say that, the country it looks like, in for a little bit of pain.
So what reforms or ways do you think California can combat the issues that they're seeing? What is the path forward?
Honestly, not entirely sure at this point. I think that you're in this situation where I think lawmakers in the state have kind of put themselves in a lose-lose position, because the state does owe that money back to the federal government. And remember, California is a blue state. President Donald Trump is not exactly the friendliest to blue states. And, there's been the tit for tat ongoing nonsense between the left and the right, and it's really worked to the detriment of the American people overall. So asking for debt forgiveness, I don't know if that's a path that's even feasible at this point. And I think that it's unfair to the American taxpayers that mismanagement of funds in the state of California has led to this situation. And so our lawmakers are responsible for it. I would like to see some cuts in, pay for our legislators. They're the ones who got us into this mess in the first place. I'm sick of the American people, and Californians in particular, suffering the consequences of this. I would like to see some accountability from the very people who got us into this mess in the first place, the ones who didn't engage in the proper oversight of that money, spent money on nonsense in some cases. I would like to see them have to pay that money back. I know that Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, wants to talk about how great our economy is here. Our GDP makes us the fourth largest economy worldwide. But at the same time, if you really look at the nitty gritty, the actual economic metrics that have a real impact on small businesses and ordinary taxpayers in the state, we are in a lot of trouble. And I know he's super wealthy. Maybe he opened his pockets up and deal with the mess that he got us in the first place. Same for the legislators who, are so busy banning things like bulletproof vests. I mean, they literally passed legislation on that. Maybe spend a little less time on that stupid legislation and spend more time on what you can do to improve our system here. And more importantly, how you can pay that money back without hurting, businesses and tax-paying Californians.
I mean, it does seem like your reporting does tend to come back to lawmakers need to be doing something different, because the status quo that they've been maintaining is to the detriment of California. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just check out the piece. I think that everyone will enjoy it. It's very dense and comprehensive, but I honestly think that it's the most detailed look into California's economic situation you'll find. So check it out.
Fantastic. Well, Ana, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
That was it for the Miller Report, Real Clear Journalism. I'm Maggie Miller. I'll see you next time.